I'd like to take this time to talk about where we are in the solar cycle and what some of the positive effects of heightened solar activity can have on human creativity, manifested in the alternative media, documentary filmmakers, also manifested in people seeking the answers in their lives. So we're in the latter portion of this solar cycle. Solar maximums last a few years, and then it goes into a minimum, and then you have a maximum again. This is a normal occurrence. However, the sun is really misunderstood. And there's a much larger picture than the power grid's vulnerability and the aurora borealis. There's a much larger picture as to how the sun impacts all life and influences trends within human society. And so this period that we're in is actually a period where I think I'm going to see a lot more content creation. I've already seen evidence of people taking to Facebook and expressing their innermost thoughts in around the periods of geomagnetic storms. Now, they're not aware of it, nor are the people aware of it when they're getting involved in Facebook conflicts or fights in real life, or being aware of when there's periods of civil unrest, as well as wars beginning between nations or nations invading other nations. When we understand the solar cycle and its impact over human consciousness, we can understand that this energy coming in periodically, which is a part of our matrix, takes us forward to the next level, whatever that level might be. And so, there is a sense of relativity with good and bad with this analogy, because some are quick to look at things through the way that they look at reality, which is not very holistically. It's judging. It's good, bad. Now with the sun, it boosts energy, so it can boost conflict. It could also boost human creativity. And for the subject of this conversation, there are periods where the solar cycle starts to come to a completion, and those solar cycles are really driving humanity forward. Those solar flares, for example, the last one, causing a geomagnetic storm on New Year's Eve. It gets people buzzing. It affects the brainwave states. And so there'll be periods where people are blogging more and producing more content and traveling more and starting their own business, writing a book, maybe building a home. And so I can see this influence of the solar cycle on this part of it after we come through the storm, if you will, and all that energy, as things start to calm down and settle down. That energy is still there. And that energy, that light coming in, is information. I believe this. And interacting with that natural electromagnetic energy coming from the sun, I believe can help us, and does help us, whether we're aware of it or not, understand certain concepts, as certain concepts may be coming and flooding into our consciousness. Now, this type of science needs to be advanced, and it's not being taught. And it's an idea whose time has come, an idea that is bulletproof. And so in my ebook that's going to be produced at some point, you'll be introduced to Alexander Chavinsky and what he discovered in 1918, and those that followed him that verified his research. He looked at 2,500 years of cycles of war and peace using sunspot data that the Chinese, thousands of years ago, began to record before the time of Galileo, but even using Western sunspot counts alone, which go back to the early 1600s to be specific. You can see the battles, the revolutions, the new countries being formed, and if you look at the last couple of decades, you can see when there's the most unrest, the most rioting, and events that some people would call manufactured. But in response to this, it's like we're being challenged by the challenges of the world. We're evolving by doing the right thing when faced with these atrocities. And so you have the natural human conscious response to not be a obedient slave of this system that's trying to consume us, but to take part in the investigation as to what's going on in this world and the sharing of information and documentation. Certain people have certain gifts and talents when it comes to writing and producing and editing. And those gifts and talents can really come out and shine like the solar flare itself when they're able to balance their left and right brain to where their creative side and their logical side are able to be cohesive. Now, I want to share an analogy that came to me in this last week to illustrate the difference in energy or impact of a solar minimum period where there are less sunspots, but there are still solar flares that can affect us and do, including weather changes and earthquakes. But then there's times when there's a solar maximum, more sunspots, more solar flares, more geomagnetic storms, more human behavioral response. The human excitability index going up, another term that I'll be introducing in my ebook, which was coined by Alexander Javinsky. And so if you could think about frying bacon with oil for a prolonged period of time on high, it's going to be splattering. And those juices are going to be intermingling, intertwining. Just one hot cooking pan. Now, compare that with the pan on its lowest setting, cooking something like a slice of bread, without butter, without oil, also for a prolonged period of time. And so when we look at the solar maximum period and its influence over human consciousness, all that energy, all that electromagnetic energy mixing in some cases with unnatural magnetic field energy. Those would be the cell phone towers. Those would be the smart meters. Those would be all those people with their unsettled thoughts that you may be intermingling with at the supermarket, in the city, in traffic, all that angst, all that boosted energy, all that misdirected energy that isn't properly grounded and redirected. So energy is energy. It's how we use it. It is how we use the energy. So the sun isn't per se to blame. The sun is the source of all life in this matrix that we are inhabiting at present. And of course, there's a larger world beyond this. But in this world, the sun is the contributing factor to a world that we can live on. We need that light. The food that we eat comes into manifestation from photosynthesis. The sun influences other factors like our magnetic field and its strength. And our magnetic field protects us from a lot of things going on in space. That sun is necessary. And influences things like the core of the Earth. And the churning of the core of the Earth directly impacts the strength of our field. There is debate as to how quickly we can go into a decline and a flipping of the Earth's poles, whether it's a quick event or a slow event. But I do think that we have seen evidence of a gradual, slow descent of the strength of our Earth's magnetic field, and it's going somewhere, and there's going to be certain effects. Space weather, extreme weather events, and not everything is controlled by our government or other governments, regardless of what weather modification technology they may have. And so with the changes in the solar system, with the changes in the sun, with the changes in the Earth's magnetic field, you have major changes in human consciousness. And there are many cycles of the sun. It gets a little bit like Russian dolls. You can learn about the larger cycles and the rise and fall of civilizations from studying the work of Maurice Cotterell. He's looked at the rise and fall of the Mayans, the rise and fall of the Romans, the rise and fall of many other civilizations, and newsflash, the latest projections on the sun is that it's going to be going into a semi-hibernation phase. So of course we'll have our solar maximum and solar minimum, but the solar maximums could be less active. Of course this affects temperature. A low period of solar activity that's extended would reduce the Earth's population incrementally and slowly, because it would affect resource access. And so we are caught in a web of time of the fall of this civilization. If we were to see a massive descent and reduction of solar activity. Maurice Cotterell also gets into how the sun directly impacts fertility rates in women. The sun literally being a regulator of the life force. And so it gets into some pretty interesting areas, but these areas of conversation, I think, give us a bigger insight into the path of humanity, the rise and fall of civilizations, and factors that can influence human society and trends. Wars and revolutions are one. That's one aspect of it. And again, it's relative, whether something's right or wrong, depending on which side, I guess, of the conflict you're on. But for the purpose of this conversation and consciousness, we're being impacted by energies that, whether we're aware of them or not, they are bringing ideas to us. And our brain waves are in a state to where things are making more sense because we're becoming, there is a polarity, balance. Back to comparing the frying pan, the frying bacon on high versus the bread on low without oil. You know, those very polarities can also be described as left and right brain, whereas the solar minimum period I associate with left brain, producing things, working. And then the right brain is more creative. It wants to be free. And so there's a polarity. There is a polarity of energy with the solar maximum and minimum, like night and day. But it's not as easy to say positive or negative, good times and bad times. There are people that are having great times during solar maximum, and their energies are being funneled and channeled and directed in a mindful manner. They're building, they're creating, they're sharing, They're embracing energy and life. They're looking into who they are spiritually. They're aware. And then there are others that don't know how to redirect their energy. They get lost in drugs and alcohol and being led to wars and conflicts and fights in the streets and Facebook wars without even knowing how they're influenced by this regular, naturally occurring energy that has affected all of our ancestors and will continue to affect and direct the evolution of humankind. And so whether people are aware of how they're affected by this, it doesn't matter. They are still affected in different ways, whether or not they're being mindful with their excess energy, with those ideas. You know, we're born with beauty, intelligence, and strength in some cases. How do we use those things in our world? To better the world, to make it a better place? Or to control? So it gets into a deeper subject as to what we do with our consciousness on the earth and what we choose to manifest. And the sun marking this birth and death cycle, and cycles within our own life, and cycles of moving and doing certain things, and new relationships, ideas, passions. And so there is a mindful aspect of destruction and creation. We can move beyond those old ways of the world and ourselves and create something anew. We can also make mistakes and disrupt things that are good when we're out of balance, and give support and energy to things that are not in our best interest. That's where propaganda comes into play to redirect people. Wars are launched. Go over here. Yes, go over there, man, with your boosted testosterone that you don't even realize where it's coming from. By understanding the sun and its effect on our world, we can make better choices. And with knowledge about the sun can, change people's brainwave states. And if they're out of balance, they can end up in a mental health crisis. We can help them understand that they're not crazy, they're having an experience. And so, things like meditation and grounding yourself, visualizing a grounding cord from the core of your being to the center of the earth, diffusing, releasing, and letting go of the energy and whatever else needs to go. And so there's a world of knowledge out there outside of worshiping the sun, but working with the energies of the sun as a life force. And going beyond fearing the sun giving you cancer or causing billions of deaths on the planet if the grid were to go down. And of course, that would trigger a power plant meltdown situation, for those of you that don't know. And you can read Matthew Stein's 400 Chernobyls. And so, yes, we face this risk. But the greater knowledge about the sun is how it influences us. As above, so below, and perhaps as below, so above. I believe these are times where people are evolving, that are choosing to evolve. And some people are evolving that aren't even necessarily choosing to evolve, but it's just happening naturally. They're being affected by their environment. And the environment they are on is an earth, which goes through its changes in climate, goes through its changes in the weather. It has earthquakes, it has volcanic eruptions. It has crustal plates moving and shifting over periods of, several years to thousands of years. It has periods where there's more food growing and less food growing. It's an environment, it's a planet where there's periods where there's less water and more water. It goes through periods where there's a lot of people and a decline of so-called great civilizations. All of this and more is directly linked to the sun's activity. So I want to leave you with this. It is in your power and it is in your consciousness to understand some of these very basic fundamentals of cause and effect, of how light affects the world, not just plants, not just water tables, not just earthquakes, but the movement and trends of human society. And knowing that this is neither, good nor bad, it just is. Everything is based on energy, and everything is interconnected in some way. We should use these ideas that we have to help others understand things, whatever it is that you have to teach. Because not only is the sun assisting us in our evolution, but helping others in their evolution by sharing knowledge and truth helps our souls evolve. Whereas Maurice Cotterell speculates, with his spiritual understanding of what's going on, he believes that by doing good deeds and evolving as a spirit brings us closer to the sun, raises our sun's voltage to where we can evolve beyond this world. And so this knowledge almost seems to dovetail and complement other spiritual teachings about the true nature of this realm that we're in. Are we going to be trapped inside this type of a world? Or will the things that we do while we're in this environment, the teaching, the sharing of knowledge, the contributions to consciousness and ideas, right now, this is the truth that I'm feeling, and this is the truth that I'm speaking. It is the sharing of knowledge that can help us evolve beyond this world. When it helps mankind, when it helps people understand, and it doesn't mean that we have to have the full understanding. The partaking in the journey of wanting to know and sharing that knowledge is a very powerful thing, which is why I encourage people to not just hold on to the information for themselves, although there may be certain things that they as an individual need to work on. So they're not a part of the problem, so they're a part of the solution. But a big part of that is the broadcasting of that truth, the speaking of that truth. That is the action. That is the moving forward. That is the evolution of mankind. And whether or not you're aware of all this, or someone else, the influence of the sun will continue to impact the world of man and woman. And we will continue to see things propelled forward, like the bicycle, cycling forward, not back and forth, but one pedal push at a time. The species is going somewhere. And we are going somewhere. And we're in a perfect moment in time to use the knowledge that has already been shared to embetter our lives. We will also see others continue on into their descent into madness, because it does seem that we are in some sort of a Kali Yuga cycle, if you will, into some sort of a dark ages. But it's in those moments of great darkness that human consciousness can be that spark of light in a darkened room. And when we activate, I'm not trying to sound too new agey, but when we shine our light and we speak our truth and we light up the darkened room, the darkened world, we are working with other fractals of light, and that is magnified. And there is almost a unified field behind those energies, and when people love each other and care for each other. And we can become such a powerful unified field that we can affect real change collectively on this planet in some ways. But what I encourage people to think outside the box of is just looking at the world through this black or white perspective of the world is good or the world is bad. When they are able to access the true light and knowledge and understand that certain things that are being done to others is immoral, from the genocide of the corruption to humans dominating humans, as humans find themselves oppressed that are evolving beyond master-slave think. They're going to be stirring, they're going to be speaking, they're going to be talking, they're going to be blogging. And the very darkness of this world is the very thing that is activating their true light. It's almost as if this is a testing ground for another world. But for now, this has been my New Year's message to you. This is a period of birth and death, and you have the power to use the knowledge and your ability to perceive certain ideas to contribute something amazing in this world that comes out of your consciousness. And I'm now convinced that we as humans have been gifted with the power of communication and idea sharing that can, in our own way, do our own part to reverse some of the damage that's been done to this earth and the people on it. If we can think about the bigger picture as spiritual beings in a human experience being affected by these causal factors, if we can see outside this expectation of having the whole world fixed in our lifetimes, or our fears of seeing everything destroyed in front of us, if we can evolve beyond that, and the absolutisms, being saved or being killed, we can understand the cycles of this human species, and that we're caught in a much larger, perhaps cosmic web of life. And so in this matrix, there is great potential for the evolution of the soul. And with that, I'll bring this podcast to a close.